Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Hanging out in the pond with Casper a little bit here, and we're going to talk about alligators versus pythons. What's the story? Who wins? What's going on? Okay, so I get asked about this one a lot, and so this is a much requested video. And so if you don't know the backstory, here in South Florida, we obviously have alligators, native, but we have an invasive apex predator as well, the Burmese python. And if you haven't seen my videos on those guys, check them out on my other YouTube channel called Florida's Wildest. And I've got quite a few videos on there catching pythons. So I caught my first Burmese python back in, I think it was 2006 was the first one I ever caught. And so these are an invasive predator. It's a giant snake native to Southeast Asia. And they were brought in through the pet trade, and they were either dumped by people who no longer wanted them, or escaped during hurricanes, or purposefully released by people who wanted to have them in the Everglades. So there are several different genesis theories right there that I talk about in a different video. But anyways, though, the point is we have a major python problem in Florida. Okay, they're not native. They're an invasive animal, and they wreak havoc out here. They eat all of our native wildlife. They eat everything. Some studies have shown a 90% decrease in mammal populations where the pythons are present. So it is a really big deal. They eat literally everything. Bobcats, white-tailed deer, every kind of wading bird or any other kind of bird you can think of. And then they also eat alligators, okay? So, and it's not like it's a one time they ate an alligator thing. It's pretty common that pythons eat alligators. Now, normally they're eating smaller alligators though, you know, like 3, 4, 5 foot alligators, but there have been accounts of 6 or 7 foot alligators being eaten as well. And when you catch one of these really big pythons, you get one that's like, 16, 17 feet long. You start to really wonder, how big of an alligator could a snake that big take out? Could it take Casper? I don't know. So let's actually talk about that, like kind of the mechanics of what's going on right here. Because a lot of people are like, what do you mean? A snake can take an alligator? Like, how's that possible? Can't the alligator just rip it in half? Well, yes, it can. But depending on who's going to win in this battle of the titans depends basically on who sees who first and who's bigger. But really, who gets a hold of who first? Because they're both very powerful predators. So if the alligator grabs the python first, they can literally just rip the python right in half. So if he were to grab a python, he could just grab it, just immediately death roll it, and just shred that thing, okay? No problem for the alligator to rip apart a python. No matter how big that python is, if he gets a good hold of it and he starts rolling, he's going to shred it. But if the python grabs the alligator first, it's a constrictor. So what they do is they grab, and with lightning speed, they then wrap around their prey. Now, if you're an alligator, basically your main and almost only defense is the jaws. Now, they can swing their tail defensively. They can try to claw defensively a little bit too. But the main defense is going to be the jaws. Now, what happens is the python grabs a hold of the gator, and then he death rolls, or I'm sorry, looking at the alligator thing in death roll. He constricts. The python wraps around the alligator, and if you're the gator, python wraps around your body, you can't bite your own chest, right? So once a snake wraps up, the gator can't bite it, and he'll thrash around, and obviously he'll try to get a hold of it, but that snake is tight along the body, so the alligator can't bite it. Now, from that point, then the snake just starts to constrict. They're extremely powerful, so it just starts to constrict and wrap tighter and tighter and tighter. And that constriction process can either cut off blood supply to the brain, or it can also prevent the animal from being able to breathe and expand back out on the lungs. I'm not sure which comes first on an alligator. That's actually a good question I would like to know the answer to, because in fact, a lot of times when a snake is constricting prey, it's not often, or let me try to phrase this correctly. What often does happen is a snake cuts off circulation. So it's just like when you have somebody in a chokehold, like in martial arts, like I've done like various MMA and stuff like that throughout my life. When you go to choke somebody, you're not trying to prevent them from breathing. You're trying to stop the blood flow to the brain. That's what puts them unconscious. You're trying to choke out that carotid artery right there. So with a lot of snakes, when they go to constrict, they're actually trying to do the same thing. Now, they wrap the whole body. So they will prevent you from being able to expand your lungs and breathe as well. But really what they want to do is cut off that blood supply to the brain and make you go unconscious that way first. Now, with an alligator, though, I'm not sure if they can do that, because around the alligator's neck, they've got those big jaw muscles right there. So I'm wondering what mechanical pathway there is really what's going on through python and alligator constriction. So I wonder what's going on there. But either way, getting in the weeds here. But yeah, so either way, snake wraps around the alligator, constricts, whether it's asphyxiation or blood flow, not sure right there. But either way, they'll constrict them. Alligator dies. Snake swallows the alligator down whole. Now, if you didn't know that, they do that as well. They do swallow their prey whole. So snakes have very elastic ligaments holding the jaws together that allow them to stretch it out to swallow something like 3 times the size of their own head. So they will swallow an alligator whole. There's a really crazy video that was out, I think it was earlier this year, taken by my friend Rosie, and shows when she's working in a lab and they do a necropsy on a python, cut it open, and there's a full alligator intact inside. Really crazy video. But anyways, though, so what can the alligator do in his defense if he is being attacked by a python? Well, hopefully he can bite it, death roll, shred it, like I was saying a moment ago. Now, what I wish we could tell them, if the alligators could just figure this out or communicate to each other somehow, there's no way to do this, unfortunately, but if they could just know, all you got to do when a python grabs you, take a big breath and sink to the bottom, because he can hold his breath for hours. Python can hold its breath for, I think, a pretty long time, longer than you think. Man, I don't want to misquote this, but I think I read it was something like 20 minutes a python can hold his breath. Pretty amazing either way, but not nearly as long as an alligator. So like, I wish you could like somehow teach alligators and get them all to understand, hey, if a python grabs you, just take a big breath as soon as you can and just sit on the bottom and wait them out, because you can if you're an alligator, right? So, man, if only they knew that they could do that, that would really turn the tide in this war of, python and alligator. But, yeah, unfortunately, they don't know that. So they, are up at the surface and rolling and constricting. And you'll see in some of the videos, you'll see the alligator is under the water with the python constricting it, and the python's head just sticking up, breathing, and the alligator's down there trying to fight it. It's just like, oh my God, bro, get in deeper water, sink down. Just wish you could tell them that, But unfortunately, they don't know it. So either way, so who gets more of who? We have a lot of evidence showing a lot of pythons eating a lot of alligators. So based on so far the evidence, it seems like pythons eat alligators more often. But how would you know how often an alligator eats a python, though? Because the thing is, when a python goes to eat an alligator, it takes a while. The constriction process takes a while. It takes a while for a snake to swallow the alligator down whole. What I'm saying is there's a greater window of visibility to be able to observe this phenomenon. Meanwhile, with an alligator, if they go to eat a python, it is considerably faster in most cases, because the alligator is just going to death roll, thrash the thing to bits, and then swallow it down. Now, if it's a really big snake, it might take the alligator a while. Like, I have seen alligators swimming around. I got video of this, actually shared it on my other YouTube channel on Florida's Wildest. You can check it out. One time I was diving and we saw an alligator with a python hanging out of its mouth, and I was able to get photos and film that from underwater. So that was really, really cool to see. So that does happen, so you can have certain cases like that. But what I'm trying to say is, in most cases, a lot of generalization here, but in most cases, snakes take longer to eat than alligators take to eat. So there is a greater window of observation to be able to see a snake eating the alligator, which can skew your results to think that more often the snake is eating the alligator, okay? Because we don't have this omnipotent view to be able to know what's going on all the time. So kind of skews the data a little bit there is what I'm trying to say. But either way, we do know that a lot of alligators eat pythons and a lot of pythons eat alligators. Now, something else that I have learned is when we catch a python and it is euthanized and they do the necropsy, a lot of times you'll see in the bone, breaks in the bone that look like they are alligator bites. They line it perfectly for alligator jaws. And even if they're not dead, I've caught quite a few pythons, and you can see it on the live snake, this massive indentation that lines up perfectly for a pair of alligator jaws where, the gator fought back, bit the python. Obviously, the python was able to win, constricted that gator. We know it because the python's the one that's alive, okay, in this situation. So, but that's usually where I have seen that, it's usually a decently sized snake in the alligator jaws. The indentations in the broken bones of the python correlate to it being a relatively small alligator. And relatively, you know, it'll look like maybe a 5 or 6 foot alligator bit that python and crushed him, like crushed the bone, but the snake still constricted the gator, killed it, and then won the fight and then swallowed it. Okay, so and yeah, the pythons will survive that. It is insane how tough these pythons are. You know, I did one video already talking about how tough alligators are, but to talk about pythons and how tough they are, oh my god. Wow, one time, my best personal example is one time I went to catch a python one time, and I saw it crossing the road. I'm like, oh man, I pulled over on my side of the road right as a truck with a trailer with a boat on it was coming the opposite way, and before I could run out and grab the python, this truck hit it. So this python got ran over by a truck with a trailer with a boat on it, and the snake was fine. I mean, not fine. Let me back up. It was not fine. It was bleeding out of its mouth. It definitely had massive internal injuries, absolutely broken vertebrae, broken ribs. I mean, just this thing got smashed. You know, that's like 6 set of tires with the trailer and the truck itself and everything like that. Just bum, just smashing over this python. And then I caught it because I thought it was, I thought I was going to die anyways. And this was like way back before there was a python program, or there wasn't anything at this point. So I wanted to take that roadkill snake and hand it over to Fish and Wildlife. And so I put it in a bag as if it was, sorry, a mosquito flying right in my ear right now. So I grabbed the snake and I thought it was already dead. I mean, it's bleeding out of its mouth. It's just like writhing, but like didn't really look like it was alive. And these guys will writhe even after they're already like, not to get too graphic, but I know stories of people that have cut the heads off and the body's still going, you know, hours later without a head. So they still move. So what I'm trying to say is I thought this snake was dead, even though it was still like moving and writhing a little bit. Bugs are bad today, guys. But so I thought this snake was dead. I put it in the bag, and because again, I thought it was dead, I just brought it home, and I was gonna drop it off with who was it at the time? NPS, I think. This was, you know, again, this is years and years ago, but I was going to drop it off, you know, the next day, and I go to check out on the next day thinking it's just a bag with a dead python in it, and it's very much alive. And like I open it up and I check on it and I'm like, oh no, it's like, it's not fine, obviously, but it's not dying, put it that way. It is going to live, like 100%. And then I handed it over, and then, you know, they probably euthanized it anyway, since that's what everybody always does, and that's how that's handled. But yeah, I was just like blown away that this thing got ran over like that, and it seemed like it was absolutely, it was going to survive. And then again, like I've got one friend who does a lot of taxidermy with the pythons that are caught, and so he's constantly like preparing the skeletons and whatnot, my friend Kevin, and he can see on the skeletons all the time of these pythons with these big breaks in the spine, and the vertebrae is just crushed, and then it fuses together, and then you just have this part of fused bone. And then we see it a lot on the live pythons. Again, when I catch them, you'll see these parts of fused bone, and that's usually either a vehicle strike or an alligator bite, and it's pretty wild. So actually see it pretty often. Now anyways, though, back to alligators and pythons. So a lot of people are amazed to hear that the python can digest the alligator, the whole alligator, because again, they swallow it down whole. And so you have a python that, you know, ingests a 6-foot alligator and liquefies the entire alligator. Okay, they'll digest the skull, everything like that. But the one part that they have difficulty digesting are these, he's gonna try to eat the leaf right there, are these nuchal scutes right here. So across the back are the osteoderms. So osteoderm literally means bone skin. I've talked about this in a lot of videos. So these osteoderms are solid bone plates, and they're actually more dense than the rest of the skeletal structure because they evolved strictly as a defense mechanism. So because of that separate evolutionary history, they're super, super dense bone, and so much so that these are known to even stop a small caliber bullet. And then again, when a python eats one, they'll actually pass those large nuchal scutes through. So imagine you throw this guy, sorry Casper, but imagine you throw this guy in a vat of acid, liquefy the entire body down to nothing, and those large osteoderms at the neck are still intact while the rest of the body is completely liquefied. And that's what's going on inside of a python when he digests the alligator. So it's just crazy to think about, you know? I mean, try to show these things up close a little bit more, but yeah, so those big ones right there, actually passing through. And they have, I've seen it in the lab where they bring the python in and it actually poops them out. Just, yeah, imagine trying to pass that thing though. Definitely not comfortable. But yeah, so it's pretty wild that these snakes will digest the entirety of the alligator, except those things, you know? Now, again, the alligators also eat the pythons. That kind of goes pretty straightforward. Like you think, you just, eat the python. It's just like eating just a really big snake. They would eat regular sized snakes anyways. So not as exotic of a topic of a conversation as the python eating the alligator though. But yeah, so it goes both ways right there. Now, the next question everybody asks is, well, because the pythons are invasive, how is this affecting the alligator population? So far, the real answer is just data deficient. We don't know. There are studies showing that 90% decrease in the mammal population, but so far, there are no studies showing a population effect on the alligator. And so we don't really know. Now, that's not to say that it's not happening. It's to say that we don't know. And a lot of people are afraid to say that. I find this as a science communicator and animal educator that a lot of people are afraid to say, we don't know. Now, in science, usually people are okay with it, but especially in the animal business, a lot of people do not like to say, I don't know. They always want to act like they're the authority, and they always want to act like they know everything. If I don't know something, I have no problem telling you guys, I mean, you'll hear my videos all the time. And that's why I also try to speak in very generalized terms and try to be like, well, we don't know, or we think this, or, we are led to believe X, Y, Z because of these reasons here. But, I just try to be very straightforward in how I try to explain something. Like when people ask how old he is, I'm like, I don't know. There's no way to know his age. Meanwhile, if you go on so many of these Everglades tours, they're like, that alligator over there, he's 33 years old, and I can tell by the size, and that's all lies. That's completely fictitious and made up. They have no idea how old the alligators are. They completely make that crap up. And people don't like to say they don't know, so they just make something up, and if you say it with enough authority in your voice, then it is fact, and people will believe it. Unfortunately, that's how it works. Anyways, alligator, python population, we don't really know. Some people anecdotally say, oh, there's less alligators here or whatever. The other problem with all this is that we're dealing with an ecosystem that is being attacked on all fronts. There are many different kinds of invasive species affecting different populations within the ecosystem. There's a massive amount of pollution in South Florida affecting different species populations like alligators. We have in South Florida especially, we have major water flow issues as there are dikes and levees and water control structures that are changing the flow, and they're trying to fix that. There's a big Everglades restoration plan, and they're trying to fix all this stuff, but nevertheless, it absolutely is affecting alligator populations. And so what I'm trying to say is that this problem has many different variables, and it's so hard to say that the population is being influenced specifically by pythons to this degree because there's so many variables. It's so hard to pinpoint exactly what's going on and why it's happening. Now, I'm sure pythons are affecting the population though. It's just we don't know to what extent, and there's no way for me to confidently tell you what extent it is or how bad it is because we just don't have the data. And again, I'm trying to be as transparent about this as I can be and not just say what I think without any basis of it, So that's why we really don't know. But without a doubt, there is some effect. Now, then you could argue, oh, well, maybe, alligators are eating enough pythons that it boosts their population and it evens out. That's very, 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 very unlikely. I don't see that as being a viable option, but maybe it is. I don't know. Again, we don't really know. But either way, though, pythons eat alligators. Alligators eat pythons. They both eat each other. And we don't really know what the final outcome is going to be. Maybe in 50 years from now, we'll have some hard data to be able to show, which side is doing more damage or what the effects actually are. Or maybe in 50 years, South Florida is going to be all underwater from global warming anyways. Who knows? Okay, it's a very complex system out here going on, so it's really hard to say. But either way, though, really cool topic to talk about. Personally, I have never seen a python eating an alligator in the wild, but I have seen an alligator eating a python. I have many friends that have seen it, though, out there, and there's lots of videos online showing it. So it's pretty cool. You can look those up, on YouTube and check it out and look into it more. Hopefully, you guys learned something about this topic right now. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, as always, like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you guys in the next one.